Just a few quick notes on the workflow of a data science project. The most important question to start when you're beginning your project is to have a clear question of the issue that or problem that you're trying to solve. This sounds easy, but in fact, it can take some work. And the more time that you spend thinking about the question that you're trying to solve, the better and more clearer prospects and clearer, better chances you will have for success in your project. So it is worth it to spend the time thinking about drilling down, really getting a sense of what the question is. For example, who would survive on the Titanic? Another important note about the question is there's a lot of great questions out there and a lot of great project ideas, but it's important that there is a predictive element to it. So, with some data and your question, is it something that can be predicted with the data? So there's a lot of great questions out there that lack predictive value and as a result wouldn't make as good of a data science project as those questions that can be predicted with the data, such as who would survive on the Titanic if considering if you had the appropriate data set. So once you get the question, then you're going to move to getting that data, finding the data. So that's usually Googling or looking on the web. We can provide different links to good data sources. And when you have that appropriate data, then you need to download it and save it appropriately. And then from there, so that's called ingestion. So after you ingest it, then you're going to look at it and you're going to clean up the data so that it's in a usable form. So for this blog post, we selected a Kaggle data set, which their data is very good. It's clean, it's cleaned up, and the Titanic data set is a famous data set. So it's great for people like you who are just getting started out, who are just starting out on this. And we have the link here to go and to download, which we'll be talking more in the next video. But, a lot of times data in the real world is messy, and you will spend a lot of time getting it cleaned up in such a way that you can actually do something with it. For example, you might have data that has different dimensions. It might have numbers. It might have categorical text. It might have floats, so decimal places. It might, there's a lot of different formats that these it could have a mix of numbers and letters. So anyway, it will definitely probably have missing values. So these are all things that luckily there are plenty of tools to address this. But like for the reason of simplicity, we are picking a project that has a good data source to begin with. So just so that you all can get the hang of what this whole data science workflow project is all about. And we have a link to a picture. There are more in academic world. There are more sophisticated versions of this diagram. For example, I'll show you here. This is something that is available online on the web. Uses a lot of technical jargon, but I think when you're starting out, something like that has been linked right here. It's like a decision tree. Do you need to decide the problem you need to solve? Come up with a hypothesis. What do you think is going to happen? What are you going to test? and decide what data you're going to collect. At that point, you're going to collect the data, and then you're going to jump into exploratory data analysis, or EDA, which we're going to discuss later on in a future video. In this process, we'll look at feature selection, we'll look at the features, the shape of the data, then we're going to train all the available models that are appropriate and evaluate the performance of those models, and then we're going to decide whether the model is good enough. Also, an important realization that this workflow is not a straight line. As you can see, even in this diagram, it is not. So you really have to be invested in the process itself and be patient with the process, because oftentimes you will start and you'll be full of steam and energy, and you'll jump in to a project and you get going, and you'll get to a point where you realize that the data, isn't appropriate, or it doesn't contain much predictive value, or maybe the model that you thought was like the home run or the great model is not a good model. And so that will cause you to have to go back to the beginning. So this is just the process, and I think data scientists are people who are excited about testing things and testing data and learning and trying, and failure is an important part of this process. So you have to be okay, and if you're not, you have to work to get yourself mentally okay with realizing that it's not going to be a straight line, that you're not going to just run through this one time and everything's going to line up perfectly and there you go. It is an iterative, so iteration, or running these experiments over and over, is an important part of the data science project workflow. So with that, we will discuss more in a future video.